So that's interesting. That's a pretty general overview. Let's get into how I do this, how I like to utilize this movement, and how I actually coach this movement in the weight room. So this is starting to get into the details of how I apply these principles. So I had Karsta help me out here. This is my overhead squat progression. And before we get too far along, the first thing I want to point out is Karsta's in weightlifting shoes. Karsta's 6'4". She's a tall athlete. We have made a decision in our weight room to put all of our athletes in weightlifting shoes, especially for loaded movement exercises, taking the lack of range of motion in the ankle out of the equation. It puts her body, her long levered body, in a position to more effectively utilize these exercises. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be training to gain range of motion from the ankle. It's just there's a way to do that, and I prefer to do that in a much more isolated fashion than to force her to try to compensate with weight over her head, for example. So you'll see she does all these exercises with weightlifting shoes on. That's going to lift her heel up and put her body in a better position, her base of support in a better position to create the angles necessary to keep the weight where she needs to keep it. So the first thing I think about when I start coaching something is I work from the feet up. And that's incredibly important in my mind because I'm building a base up to the top. I believe that that's a little bit more of an efficient way to kind of teach these things, but you could make an argument that you can go from top down. My preference is to go from bottom up. So right now, there's no focus on her upper body at all. I'm having her hold this band off of a bar here simply to create a little bit of tension in her upper body. It also serves a secondary purpose of helping her have something to kind of pull on so that way she can squat with the flat feet. Squatting with the flat feet is incredibly important and another reason why we utilize weightlifting shoes. So as you see, she starts exercising here. Her feet are flat and she's working to create that external tension against that little red band around her knees. She's trying to pull that band apart as she squats, holding some simple tension in her upper body, but the focus in this particular exercise is to keep her feet flat and put tension, trying to break that little red band around her knees. Again, not much to be said for the upper body at this point. I do cue breathing pretty heavily. It's probably beyond the scope of this particular presentation, but breathing is incredibly important. And you can see as Karsta does this, she's breathing in on the way down and out on the way up. And that's important. So the next level of the progression, you can see the focus hasn't changed. I've just changed the position of her arms to, again, add a little bit of challenge to the upper body, but the focus is still in her feet and breaking the band and good breathing patterns. And you can see she does a great job here. Her feet are flat. She's working to break that band and she's keeping a nice posture. Again, shin and back angles should be mirroring each other. Now, this is where we start to pay attention to the upper body, is when she gets into this W position, what I ask her to do is point her thumbs back behind her. And what that's doing is that's putting the shoulder into external rotation. She is spreading her chest, keeping tension in her upper back. And now this is where you're going to start to see some of the progression into going overhead become really important. Focus is still on the feet, still on breaking the band, focus on good movement patterns, but now she has to create some tension, externally rotate, spread her chest, stay nice and tall, shin and back angles mirroring each other. And she's just holding a little bit of tension there, but externally rotating, which is incredibly important for the structure of the shoulder and the body to be able to distribute that force appropriately. So all we did now is just move her arms up. So she's working to lock out. What's happened is she's taken her body and made it longer, meaning it's more challenging to coordinate. And again, we've talked about coordination. Coordination is incredibly important. To be able to coordinate a squatting pattern with your arms over your head is obviously much more challenging than squatting with your arms by your side. And you can see, again, working from the bottom to the top, we have feet flat, working to create tension at the knees, breaking that little red band. Nice, smooth breathing patterns, breathing in on the way down, out on the way up, and then thumbs back, creating external rotation, showing me, the person in front of her, her armpits. That's the cue I like to use. Show me your armpits. And that's done by pointing your thumbs back behind you as you do this exercise. Now I've given her a PVC pipe. And the reason why I've given her a PVC pipe is you can no longer actually physically point your thumbs back behind you. The bar is in the way. And so the action is still there. She's still actively, and you can see as she moves here, her shoulders compensate for that. She creates that tension in her upper back and body by externally rotating. You can see she's showing me her armpits. She's trying to break that band. It's up over her head, not a lot of load there, but she's working to create that tension in her shoulders and her upper body. Because again, as you start to add load, those compressive and rotational forces are going to get higher. And if you don't have a response to that, creating tension strategically in your upper body, that bar is going to eat you alive. It's probably going to be uncomfortable. It's probably going to hurt a little bit. It's definitely going to push you around, and you're not going to be able to get the depth you're looking for. So finally, we give her a bar and let her kind of do her thing. And so a little bit more load here, no band coming horizontally from the top anymore. Now we're strictly looking at compression coming down from the weight and the rotation that begins to occur as she has the freedom to now move. That bar has freedom to play here. And so again, feet are flat, tension on the little red band, smooth breathing patterns, breathing in on the way down, out on the way up, externally rotating, trying to break the bar or show me her armpits. And she's working to create the back and shin angles necessary to distribute that load effectively. So where the rubber meets the road, some tips and tricks here of the overhead squat progression. I like to do 2 sets of 5 of each one of those progressions that you've seen. That gets you a nice base, a nice opportunity to get quality reps in without a lot of load and practice a lot. I go feet first and then work my way up the chain. I believe the feet are the foundation. That's the part you need to start with. That's the base of your triangle. Start there. Everything else tends to figure itself out. Holds or pauses can add challenge without adding load. So ask somebody to get into an overhead squat position and then freeze and hold and pause for a certain amount of time. 2 seconds, 1 second, 5 seconds. That challenge can force the body to have to create tension appropriately without having to put a bunch of weight and ask somebody to put a bunch of weight over their head, which sometimes can be unsafe. It does not need to be heavy. Load can be corrective though. There's a certain point at which putting some weight on the body on a bar can force the body to do things necessary to achieve the exercise safely. Putting a little bit of load on a bar is okay. Obviously, you don't want to load them up to the point where they're struggling too much. This shouldn't be an overly taxing exercise. You should be able to do it with high number of reps or decent high number of reps. But having some load is important. It's going to impart some of those compressive and rotational forces on the body, and the body's going to respond to that in ways to create the reciprocal forces back out, external rotation and tension. If all else fails, focus on your breathing. If you're finding the athletes are struggling to kind of create the tension up the chain, chances are it's breaking down somewhere in the midsection. And if you can force them to focus just on their breath, breathing in on the way down, out on the way up, nice full breathing, that's going to naturally create the tension in the places you're going to need it. At the bottom of that squat, you're going to be filled up with air. That pressure pushing out is going to work to resist the pressure and compression coming back down. So if all else fails, focus on your breathing. Now, we're coming to the end here, and so I just have kind of a highlight reel of Karsta here doing her thing, bouncing balls, as we kind of go through a little bit of a recap. So to kind of recap some of the things we talked about here, tight is right if you can create the proper conditions to do so. Joint position dictates muscle function. The ball knows angles, the body knows angles. You have to be able to put your body in a position, the correct position, to utilize your activity if you're going to do it safely and in a way to avoid injury and ultimately improve performance. Identify external and internal forces. That takes some time, that takes reps to be able to truly understand what forces the body is going through and how you have a response to those forces. But that's also kind of the tricks of the trade. You have to be able to identify forces happening to the body, and then also the forces necessary to combat those things. And that's the safety, that's the health, that's the injury prevention piece. Parallel shin and back angles create efficient force distribution. I challenge you now to watch sport and not see parallel shin and back angles. I think you'd be surprised, especially in loading patterns, landing, things like that. You'll see how often shin and back angles parallel one another. The goal of weightlifting for sport is to be supportive and reinforce sporting movements to reduce injury and improve performance. That is the name of the game. The idea is to support and reinforce movements. Sometimes that means doing things very differently than you're used to. If playing volume is really high, chances are you want to support the movements by doing the opposite of that and allowing the body to find and achieve some balance. But the main goal, the end of the day, again, rubber meets the road, is to support and reinforce sporting movements to reduce injury and improve performance.